Okay, so we're going to make a generic class in C#, and once we make this class, it'll be really clear what a generic class actually does. So let's start a new project. Do File, New, Project. I'm going to choose Visual C#, Console App, and click OK. Okay, so let's add the generic class. So we'll take this, copy it. And we'll call this class my match check. And we'll close it off. Okay. And we'll just check the syntax. Everything's fine. The console window opened and closed, so let's make that stay open. I'm just going to write OK. And we use the console read key to keep the console open. Okay, give that a run. And that just shows that our syntax is okay. So let's actually turn this into a generic. This tells us that it's a generic. This tells the program it's a generic. I'm going to call this my data. Okay, and we're going to use this when we make our function. I'm going to make a boolean. Okay. Let's call this my match was found. And then we're going to use this my data. We'll call this val1. And we'll add another one. And we'll call it val2. And just to shut off the IntelliSense from telling us it's an error, right now I'll just return true. And that's so I can check the syntax on a compile. Okay, so let's run it. And we can see there are no errors, so everything's okay. Now, let's put some logic in here. So now, the idea of this is that this can be an int, or a string, or other things, which we're gonna say when we call this. We're gonna say be a string, be an int, and when we say that, these will become ints or strings. Okay. So in a generic, we're gonna do this. We're gonna say val1. You don't use this. So we're gonna use this. If val1 dot equals val2, okay, return true, else return false. Okay, so that's pretty much it. This is a generic function, and we're going to toggle this so we can make this an int, and we can make it a string or whatever, and then this will work with whatever comes in. Okay, so let's call our generic class. So I'm going to copy this, and we'll come up here into the main, and we have to tell it what type it is. And I'll say my object, just to show that it's mine, that I made it, and it's not a system function. Okay? And same thing here. When we do this, we have to tell it it's an int. We're working with ints. Okay, so something else we have to do. This is the function we want to call. So we're going to have to make it a public so that we can actually see it. Okay? So now when we go up here and we copy this, you'll see that this is now, we can actually now see it. So there's our val1 and our val2. So I'm going to say 2 and 4. So 2 and 4 will not be equal. So let's take this and we're gonna write it out. Okay? So now we're actually gonna compare two ints, because we have this function dedicated to being an int now. This generic, we're telling it, this is an int. You're an int. You're an int. And so it's going to compare these as two ints, as two numbers. Okay, so when we run this, we're going to pass in 2 and 4 as an int. It's going to say, does it equal? It's not going to equal, so we're going to return false. So let's run it. And there's our false. Now here's the essence of the generic. We can actually change this. We don't have to change this. So now this is permanent. We don't have to touch anything to make these act as strings now. What we're going to do is we're going to say up here, you're now a string. This tells the generic that the variables that are coming in are now strings. Okay? And then we're going to change this to cat and dog. Okay? So now we're going to compare two strings. So when this runs, this will be a string, a string, a string. And now we'll do the comparison, and cat will not equal dog. Okay, so it's false. But now when we change it to dog, dog, it will be true. So there it is. And that's it. That's a generic. And that's how simple it is.